the robber who never touched the floor and never got caught. In the winter of 1987, when snow fell like whispers over the city of Pittsburgh and street lamps flickered beneath a sky heavy with clouds, a man named Thaddeus Vale moved through the shadows with a silence so complete it defied belief. He wasn't tall, nor was he broad, just 5'9", wiry with fingers long enough to dance across piano keys or slip between window frames without a sound. His eyes, a pale gray like thawing ice, missed nothing. And though he stole from banks, jewelry stores, and even the homes of the wealthy in Shadyside and Fox Chapel, no one ever saw him run, no one ever heard his footsteps, and not a single footprint was ever found leading away from the scene. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? It started on a night thick with fog, the kind that clung to coat collars and muffled the distant wail of trains along the Monongahela River. The date was December 18th, just 3 days before Christmas. The First National Trust on Fifth Avenue had closed at 5, its vault sealed, alarms armed, security guards patrolling in pairs. Yet, by 10 past 2 in the morning, someone had bypassed every system without tripping a wire, without leaving fingerprints, without setting off motion detectors calibrated to sense the flutter of a moth's wing. What they found the next morning chilled the blood of the manager, a man named Harlan Wexford, who arrived at 6:30 sharp with coffee steaming in a paper cup. The front door was locked. The glass unbroken, the alarm panel glowed green, fully operational. But inside, the vault stood open, its steel door yawning wide like a slack jaw. $200,000 in cash, mostly 20s and 50s, bundled in rubber bands, was gone. Also missing, a collection of rare gold coins, appraised at over $400,000, belonging to a reclusive collector from Sewickley. And yet, there were no signs of forced entry, no scuff marks on the floor, no grease on the keypad, nothing. Only one thing puzzled the investigators more than the theft itself, the surveillance footage. On the tape, recorded from a camera mounted high in the corner of the lobby, there was no intruder, just darkness. Static. Then, at exactly 2:12 a.m., a flicker, a distortion, like heat rising from asphalt. For 3 seconds, the image warped. When it cleared, the vault door was slightly ajar. But no figure appeared, no hand reached in, no shadow passed. It was as if the money had simply decided to leave on its own. By midweek, newspapers across Pennsylvania carried the headline, "Phantom Thief Strikes Pittsburgh." Radio stations played eerie synth music behind breathless reports. Police Chief Lyle Mancini held a press conference, his voice tight with frustration, insisting that no man can walk through walls and vowing that the perpetrator would be caught. But deep down, even he felt a chill he couldn't explain. Because this wasn't the first time. 3 months earlier, in September of 1987, the Regal Jewelers on Walnut Street had been hit under nearly identical circumstances. Surveillance showed nothing. Alarms never sounded. The safe opened as if by magic. A string of black pearls, once worn by a silent film star, vanished without a trace. And again, no footprints. No fingerprints. No scent for K9 units to follow. Then, in November, it happened at the Carnegie Savings and Loan in Mount Lebanon. This time, a motion sensor near the back office did register something, but only for half a second. The reading? A weightless disturbance, like air shifting in a vacuum. Investigators dismissed it as equipment malfunction, but Thaddeus Vale knew better. He wasn't a criminal by birth, nor was he driven by greed. Born in a coal mining town in West Virginia Welch, population 3,000, he'd grown up in a house with no running water and a roof that leaked when it rained. His father died in a mine collapse when Thaddeus was 9. His mother worked double shifts at a diner, her hands cracked from dishwater and cold. By the time he was 16, he taught himself to pick locks, not because he wanted to steal, but because he needed medicine for his younger sister, Lyra, who suffered from seizures doctors said were nervous in origin and expensive to treat. His first break-in was clumsy, a pharmacy at midnight, gloves too big, heart pounding like a war drum. He took only what he needed, phenobarbital, syringes, a bottle of cod liver oil, left a note behind, written in careful script, "I will repay you." TV. No one ever came looking. Over the years, he grew quieter, faster, more precise. He studied architecture, mechanics, airflow patterns, and human behavior. He learned how to move without displacing air, how to step where pressure sensors weren't calibrated, how to exploit blind spots in infrared fields. But his greatest skill, his secret, was not technology. It was timing. Thaddeus didn't walk during heists. He floated. Not literally, of course, but close enough to fool machines, cameras, and instincts alike. Through a combination of controlled breathing, muscle relaxation, and an almost meditative state of balance, he could reduce his physical impact to near zero. He wore custom shoes lined with aerogel foam, lighter than air, insulating, silent. His clothing, tailored from a blend of synthetic fibers used in aerospace gear, absorbed light and muffled sound. He moved in rhythm with the building's natural vibrations, the hum of HVAC systems, the creak of settling beams, so that his presence became part of the background noise. And he never touched the floor. Not directly. Instead, he used a technique he called shadow stepping, placing each foot on the very edge of tiles, where grout met wall, or balancing on the lip of a baseboard, distributing his weight across multiple micropoints. In some cases, he'd enter through ventilation shafts, descending slowly on ropes made of braided Kevlar thread, thin as spider silk, strong as steel. He'd hang suspended above carpets, vaults, marble floors reaching down, with tools shaped like fishing rods to retrieve items without ever grounding himself. To the world, it seemed impossible. To him, it was survival. By early January of 1988, the FBI had assigned Agent Rhoda Keene to the case. A veteran of white-collar crime divisions, she'd transferred from Quantico after solving a series of art thefts in New Orleans using behavioral profiling. She was sharp, skeptical, and immune to sensationalism, but even she paused the first time she watched the grainy bank footage from Fifth Avenue. "There's no one there," she muttered, rewinding the tape for the 7th time. Her partner, Dale Haskins, leaned forward. "Maybe it's a glitch." "No," she said, voice low. "Look at the dust motes. See how they shift right before the vault opens? Something passed through. Something quiet." They began cross-referencing all previous unsolved thefts in the region. 8 in total, dating back to 1984. All shared the same pattern: no entry, no exit, no evidence. And in 6 of them, weather reports mentioned unusually dense fog on the night of the crime. Coincidence? Possibly. But then, on January 15th, 1988, the unthinkable happened again. This time, it was the home of Arthur Pembroke, a retired steel magnate living in a gated estate in Sewickley Heights. The mansion had 20 rooms, a private gallery, and a security system designed by a former CIA contractor. Motion sensors, laser grids, thermal imaging, everything. At 1:43 in the morning, the system registered a temperature fluctuation in the east wing. Not enough to trigger an alert, just a brief dip like a breath against glass. When Pembroke's housekeeper arrived at 7, she found the display case in the study shattered, not broken outward, but inward, as if crushed from within. Missing, a platinum pocket watch engraved with the coordinates of the Titanic's final resting place, and a letter signed by Thomas Edison promising collaboration on a wireless illumination device. Again, no prints, no alarms, no sign of struggle, but this time there was something new. On the marble floor, just beneath the shattered glass, lay a single playing card. The Queen of Spades, flipped face up. Agent Keene stared at it in the evidence photo, her pulse quickening. "He's communicating," she whispered. Haskins frowned. "With whom?" "With us," she said. "Or maybe with someone else." She ordered a full forensic sweep of all prior crime scenes, anything left behind, no matter how insignificant. And 2 days later, in a dusty envelope from the Regal Jewelers case, they found it a matchbook from a diner in Clarksburg, West Virginia. On the back, scribbled in pencil, "For Lyra. Soon." Keene traced the diner's records. Only one person had asked for directions to Welch that week, a man matching Thaddeus Vale's description, paying an exact change, wearing a long coat and sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She flew to West Virginia the next morning. Welch was a ghost of its former self, storefronts boarded up, miners out of work, children playing in empty lots where company houses once stood. She found the Vale residence, easily a sagging frame house on Sycamore Street, paint peeling, porch steps rotted, no lights on, no car in the driveway, but smoke curled from the chimney. She knocked. Silence. Then The soft click of a lock. The door opened just enough to reveal a woman, thin, pale, wrapped in a wool blanket. Her eyes were red, her hair tied back with a frayed ribbon. "Yes?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Mrs. Vale," Keene said gently. "I'm Special Agent Rhoda Keene, FBI. I'm looking for your son, Thaddeus." The woman didn't flinch, didn't gasp, just exhaled slowly, like someone releasing a burden. "He's not here," she said, "and he won't come back." "Why not?" "Because he's done what he needed to do." Keene stepped forward. "Ma'am, your son is suspected in multiple thefts, over $1 million in losses. People are scared. We need to talk to him." The woman smiled faintly. "Talk to him? You think he'd let you catch him? You think he leaves tracks because he wants to be found?" She opened the door wider. Inside, the room was sparse wood stove, cot, bookshelf, crammed with engineering manuals and old medical journals. On the wall, a map of Pittsburgh was pinned with tiny red dots, each marking a location of a theft. But in the center, a photograph. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, smiling beside a hospital bed. A caption beneath, handwritten, "Lyra's first seizure-free year. She's alive," the woman said softly. "Thanks to him, the medicine, the specialists, the treatments they said we could never afford. He gave her time. 5 years. She passed last April. Peacefully." Keene felt her throat tighten. "And now?" she asked. "Now he's gone," the mother said. "Where? I don't know. Maybe helping someone else. Maybe just resting." She handed Keene a small box wrapped in brown paper. "This came yesterday. No return address. Just your name." Keene opened it. Inside, the Edison letter, the Titanic watch, and a note on thin stationery. "Return these. They were borrowed. T.V. No arrest warrant was ever served, no trial convened. The FBI closed the case in March of 1988, citing insufficient evidence and lack of identifiable suspect." The media moved on. The public forgot. But in quiet corners among locksmiths, security consultants, and urban legends, whispered in police academies, Thaddeus Vale became myth. They say he still moves. On nights when fog rolls in from the rivers, when the wind carries the scent of coal and frost, some claim to see a figure drifting past windows, never casting a shadow, never making a sound. They say he doesn't steal anymore. They say he helps. A wallet returned to a college student who lost it on the T. A stack of bills slipped under the door of a family facing eviction. A prescription filled anonymously at a pharmacy in McKeesport. And sometimes, if you look closely at the snow-covered ground after such events, you'll notice something strange. No footprints. Just the faint impression of edges like someone walked on the very border of the world, never quite landing, never touching, never caught, and perhaps never meant to be. A ghost ship drifted into port with a fresh meal on the stove. It was the winter of 1987 when the fishing trawler Marianne V slipped silently into the harbor of Gloucester, Massachusetts, just before dawn on a brittle February morning. No lights flickered from her deck, no voices called out, no radio signals preceded her arrival. She came like a shadow drifting through fog, her bow nudging gently against Pier 6 as if guided by unseen hands. The first to notice her was Elias Thorne, a weathered dockhand with 40 years of salt in his bones and frost still clinging to the brim of his wool cap. He'd arrived early to check lobster traps, steam rising from his coffee cup curling into the pale gray sky. When he saw the vessel listing slightly, paint peeling like old skin, name barely legible beneath grime, he froze. His breath caught, not from cold, but from instinct. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. "Before we begin, tell me where are you listening from and what time is it there?" Elias approached slowly, boots crunching over frozen patches of seaweed and ice. The Marianne V had been reported missing 3 weeks prior, last seen off the Georges bank during a sudden nor'easter that had swallowed 2 other boats whole. The Coast Guard had called off search efforts after 10 days, assuming all hands lost, and yet here she was, intact, afloat, and strangely, undisturbed. No signs of storm damage, no gaping holes in the hull, nothing overturned on deck, just silence. A thick, suffocating silence that pressed against Elias's ears like cotton. He called out once, twice, no answer. Then, steeling himself, he climbed aboard. The moment his boot touched the deck, he felt it a chill that wasn't from the wind. It coiled up from the wood beneath him, sharp and unnatural, as though the ship itself were holding its breath. He moved toward the wheelhouse. The door hung open, swaying slightly with the motion of the tide. Inside, the radio crackled with static, a faint loop of Morse code repeating endlessly 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots, SOS, over and over, though the power should have been dead. The logbook lay open on the chart table, the last entry dated February 3rd. Heavy fog. Currents erratic. Can't see land. Something in the water. The handwriting grew jagged, frantic, as if written under duress. Elias flipped back a few pages. Earlier entries spoke of routine hauls, calm seas, even jokes about Captain Rourke's terrible stew. But then, around January 28th, the tone shifted. Crew restless. Emery claims he saw lights beneath the surface, not bioluminescence, too steady, too deep. Emery Vale, third mate, quiet man from inland Maine who rarely spoke unless spoken to. He'd joined the crew only 2 months prior, replacing a man who'd quit mid-season, saying the boat felt haunted. Emery hadn't believed in ghosts, or so the others said. But his journal, found later tucked inside a duffel bag below decks, told a different story. Elias descended the narrow metal stairs into the galley, flashlight beam trembling in his grip, and there, on the cast iron stove, sat a pot, still warm. Steam curled lazily from its cracked lid, carrying the scent of onions, potatoes, and something meaty beef, maybe, or pork. A spoon rested against the rim, crusted with congealing gravy. Beside it, a chipped blue mug held tea, long gone cold, but unmistakably brewed that morning. Or the night before, or whenever. Time didn't seem to matter here. He backed away, heart hammering. No one could have boarded without being seen. The harbor was monitored, no small craft had entered after midnight, and yet the meal was fresh. As if someone had stepped away just seconds ago. Then he heard it. A soft clink. From the mess hall, like a fork tapping a plate. He turned slowly. The door stood ajar. Darkness pooled beyond it. He pushed it open with the toe of his boot. Tables bolted to the floor, benches intact, nothing out of place. Except on the farthest table, set for four plates, each with a portion of stew untouched, forks laid neatly beside them, napkins folded, salt and pepper shakers aligned perfectly. And at the head of the table, a 5th plate, empty. But the chair was pulled out, as if someone had just risen. Elias didn't scream, he didn't run, he simply stood there, flashlight shaking, breath coming in short white puffs, until the sound came, again not a clink this time, but a whisper, faint, guttural, from the sleeping quarters below. He didn't go down, not then. He scrambled back onto the pier, shouting for help, voice raw with panic. By the time the Coast Guard arrived, the pot on the stove was cold, the steam had vanished. But the stew remained, uneaten, perfectly preserved, as if time had paused mid-bite. Captain Silas Rourke, grizzled veteran of 30 seasons at sea, was never found. Nor were his 3 crewmen, Emery Vale, Harlan Pike, and Jocelyn Crow, the youngest at 23, who'd signed on to save money for nursing school in Portland. Their personal effects were still in their bunks. Photos of family, letters half-written, toothbrushes damp. But no bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle, just absence. The investigation lasted 6 weeks. Divers scoured the hull, sonar scanned the seabed, forensic teams analyzed the stew, confirmed it contained beef, carrots, and barley, cooked within hours of the ship's arrival. No toxins, no hallucinogens, nothing abnormal. Yet every sailor who boarded the Marianne V afterward reported the same thing. The smell of cooking food, even when the stove was cold, the sensation of being watched from empty rooms, whispers in low, guttural tones, always just beyond hearing. One junior officer, Lyle Mander, claimed he saw Emery Vale standing at the railing at 3:17 in the morning, staring into the fog, mouthing words he couldn't understand. When approached, the figure dissolved like mist. The ship was towed to dry dock, declared unsalvageable not due to structural damage, but because morale among crews plummeted. Men refused to work on her. Mechanics reported tools going missing, only to reappear in locked lockers. Electricians swore lights turned on by themselves, dim and flickering, casting long shadows that moved against the walls. By April, the decision was made. The Marianne V would be scuttled, sunk in deep water beyond the continental shelf, where currents would carry her far from shipping lanes. The ceremony was brief. No flags, no speeches, just a single flare shot into the twilight sky as charges detonated along her keel. She sank slowly, bow first, vanishing beneath the waves with an almost ceremonial grace. But here's what they didn't report, what never made the official logs. 3 days later, a Norwegian freighter, the Fjordwind, radioed the Boston Maritime Authority from 50 miles east of Sable Island. They'd spotted wreckage, part of a wooden table, scorched at the edges, floating amid a slick of oil. Attached to it, miraculously preserved in a sealed plastic sleeve, was a page torn from Emery Vale's journal. The handwriting was frantic, ink smudged as if written in haste or fear. "They're not dead. We never left. The ship doesn't sink. It drifts, it waits, it feeds. The stove is always warm, the table is always set, and one day it will come back. With a fresh meal. For us." The page was authenticated, handwriting matched samples from Emery's personnel file, ink consistent with pens issued to crew, but how it survived explosion, fire, and ocean pressure, no scientist could explain. And then, on the evening of December 9th, 2012, a local fisherman named Corwin Haskins reported seeing a vessel matching the Marianne V's description near Jeffrey's Ledge. Fog was heavy that night, visibility near zero. He claimed the ship passed within 20 feet of his boat, lights dark, decks empty. But from her galley window, a yellow glow pulsed like a stove lit below. He tried hailing her, no response. When he turned to grab his radio, she was gone. Vanished into the mist. No wreckage was found, no trace on radar. The Coast Guard dismissed it as a mirage, a trick of the light. But Corwin insisted, said he smelled stew in the air, beef, carrots, barley, and underneath something darker, metallic, like blood. To this day, Gloucester fishermen avoid that stretch of water after sunset, especially in winter, especially when the fog rolls in thick and silent. Some say if you listen closely on still nights, you can hear the Morse code 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots echoing from beneath the waves. Others claim to see a faint glow beneath the surface, drifting with the current like a lantern in the deep. And every year, around February 10th, a single bouquet of wilted wildflowers appears on the railing of Pier 6. No note, no signature. Just flowers brown at the edges, salt stiffened, as if carried across the sea. Left there, some say, by someone who never came home. But perhaps the most unsettling detail, the one that lingers in the mind long after the story ends, is this. When authorities finally cleaned out the galley before scuttling the ship, they found something odd in the cupboard. A can of stew. Store-bought, label faded, best before date, October 12th, 1986. Expired over a year earlier, yet the can was warm to the touch. And when opened, it was full. Steaming. Fresh. As if just heated. No one ate it. It was incinerated along with the rest. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls just right through the rigging of moored boats, people swear they can smell it, that rich, savory aroma. Onions, potatoes, meat slow-cooked for hours. And they wonder, who was it meant for? And more importantly, is the table still set? The sea keeps its secrets well, but every now and then, it returns them to drift into port, unannounced, uninvited, with a fresh meal on the stove and chairs waiting to be filled. So the next time you walk past an empty dock and the wind carries the faint scent of cooking food, ask yourself, was that the neighbor's dinner? Or something else? Something older? Something hungrier? Something that remembers your name and knows when you'll be home?
The stories. Phone recording documented their final minutes. The file that surfaced last winter was short and brutal, and local dispatch confirmed the voices matched a missing maintenance pair. Greta Lyle, 32, a small-town reporter, listened 3 times before writing anything because the last minute hid everything important. Greta lived in a valley where the hills felt close and the roads curled between pines that ate cell bars after mile 6. Her editor wanted a follow-up on the county's mothballed call boxes, and she planned a simple piece about budgets and weathered steel. The plan changed when a man left a padded envelope at the office desk, and the receptionist slid it toward Greta. Inside lay a cheap thumb drive and a handwritten note that said, "Play it now." which was not exactly subtle guidance. The audio began with tires crushing wet grit and a fan belt squeal, then a breathy laugh that carried a little nervous catch. A woman said, "Hit record anyway," and a man replied, "We will just send it to Burgess later," and gravel pinged the undercarriage. Greta paused there and rewound because archived calls mentioned a supply clerk named Burgess, and the tone was easy routine. Dispatch had logged their crew leaving the yard after lunch, and the destination was a ranger turnout near a decommissioned radio tower. The county named them as Mara Keene, 29, and Colby Ash, 33. Both contract road technicians paid hourly wages. They were fixing marker posts along a flood reroute where tourists kept missing the detour, according to a memo Greta later obtained. She kept a yellow notebook, and she recorded exact timestamps straight from the audio, then cross-matched with the dispatch exit time. Static rose and fell, like weak FM, which fit a corridor where the timber wall trapped signals, something locals complain about every spring. The woman on the file spoke again, and her voice changed colors like people do when they feel watched, but pretend they do not. "Do you see that cone?" she asked, and the man said, "Not our brand." Then the truck door chirped, then another small, impatient silence. 2 clicks sounded like metal against plastic, which Greta later matched to the folding rod used to set reflective stakes at bends. A train horn cried far away with 2 short blasts, then 1, and Greta wrote that pattern down and circled it 3 times. A witness told her a freight line hugs the river, and the drainage there creates its own echo that stacks horns out strangely. If the pattern matched that schedule, she could place the recording on a map within minutes, which is all any timeline really needs. At 23 minutes in, a male voice new to the scene drifted across the microphone, thin and half-carried by the wind. "You folks need a hookup," he said. And a second voice we never hear again muttered something that sounded like numbers and road letters. Greta paused again and wrote an underline under the word hookup because that is tow slang, and Colby worked nights at an actual wrecker. He would not pay cash for a roadside pull unless something felt wrong, and the county did not call contractors to rescue their own truck. Colby said, "We are good," and the stranger answered, "Road is closed ahead," which matched a rumor about impassable washouts that week. Greta called the county shop and asked about the washouts, and a foreman said the road was soft but open with flagged cones. The file captured an engine idling close, and a beeper chirped 3 times, the exact rhythm used by older reverse alarms on flatbeds. A chain clinked against a bumper, and the woman whispered, "We should go." Then the phone scuffed fabric as someone reset their grip. Greta listened to that fabric sound again and again because the microphone scraped a zipper, which gave brand and suggested jacket style. She went to the surplus store and found county-issued windbreakers with chunky metal pulls that rasp exactly like the noise at 19. The envelope had no return address, but courier records put it at a copy shop where a camera watched the counter until closing time. The clerk remembered a man with a field jacket and a gray cap, and he bought a single USB stick with cash and no receipt. Greta did not print that part, and she did not share it with anyone besides her editor, because he asked for caution and patience. Instead, she drove the turnout on a weekday afternoon and brought a friend who knew rail schedules, then they listened at the shoulder. The freight line sang through the ravine, and the horn called twice, then once, and the echo folded back with the same aching cadence. She drew a circle over the map where that sound best fit, then paced off the shoulder and found a rut that bit deep and straight. Down the slope, hidden by alder, lay an abandoned call box faceplate with new screws driven into old holes, clean and too shiny. The county had removed the boxes after a storm in 2019, and crews reported salvage thieves yanking wire for quick cash. Greta photographed the screws and the plate, then noted fresh shoe prints with a square heel that looked like a hardware store special. Her phone had no bars, so she returned to town and requested traffic camera pulls for the nearest intersection where coverage still worked. A state tech sent stills from a ridge camera that framed taillights heading toward the turnout after midday in a light, steady rain. One frame showed a retired tow truck with faded lettering, and the next showed the county pickup tucked behind it like a shy cousin. Greta played the audio again and caught a faint double click at 29, the sound of a handheld radio powering and squelching. That detail mattered because the county monitors one frequency while tow outfits use another, and she recognized the wrong hiss entirely. She interviewed a grocery clerk who stocked drinks near the bin of hand warmers, and he remembered selling 2 sleeves to a road tech. The receipt time sat within 10 minutes of the exit log, and his detail about the jacket patch matched the issued windbreakers perfectly. A bartender at the junction recalled a flatbed guy bragging about his old badge from a volunteer rescue club that folded years ago. He liked to flash it to get lanes cleared, and he kept a coil of chain in the cab, and he always smelled like 2 cycle gas. Greta ran the plate fragments from the ridge stills through a spreadsheet of county surplus auctions, and one number set rang familiar. A retired truck had been sold to a seasonal contractor 5 years back, and that contractor worked grading crews through 3 winters. She asked the yard boss for copies of work orders and found add-ons for road closures that never reached the public board for posting. 3 were billed to a line called Emergency Barricade Verification, which can pass quiet if everyone is cold and trying to go home. Greta returned to the file and let the final minute run without a pause, and the sound tightened like a knot being cinched hard. "Back it down," said the stranger, and another voice said, "Winch." Then the engine strained, then the woman whispered, "No, wait, please." Her phone captured boots on gravel and a hollow shutter like a box panel being struck by a fist, then a clatter of chain settling again. Colby said, "We are leaving," and the stranger replied, "Road is closed." Then something metallic squealed, and the microphone hit the seat. Greta recognized the squeal later when a mechanic showed her a retired foot brake on that model, which locks if someone yanks hard. A second engine revved and then drifted away, and the train horn cried again, which pinned the window tighter than any wristwatch could. The file ended with water, sound, and wind, and then a barely audible sentence that a lab enhanced for the sheriff before the case closed. A female voice whispered, "He is not alone," which fits the bartender's story, and one traffic still that shows a second vehicle tailing the flatbed. Greta never wrote the name of the contractor who later died in a solo wreck on a dirt connector above the timberline in early spring. The county cited the company for unpermitted closure devices, and a civil suit settled quietly after an insurance review and sealed filings. The recording was cited in the settlement as contemporaneous documentation, which means the phone created a timeline that prosecutors trust completely. It helped link unreported cones, a counterfeit callbox faceplate, and an old truck beeper that chirped a signature 3-note pattern. Greta visited the turnout one more time when the snow melted, and she stood where the ruts cut dark through the alder roots. She listened for horns and for chain, and she watched the waterline move, and she wrote names she would never print anywhere. A retired dispatcher took her call and confirmed that a training tape from 2015 uses the same 3 beeper chirps. It teaches rookies to ignore unauthorized closures unless a county badge verifies, because anyone can buy cones and a safety vest. Greta asked him what he remembered most from long nights watching a map blink, and he said mistakes always make more sound than luck. He said a good tech marks those sounds. Then he asked if she could hear her own pencil scratching when she replayed the last minute. She told him yes, and she told him about the zipper scrape that matched the metal pull, and he laughed, then he went quiet. He said that noise meant the person tried to pocket the phone without breaking the recording, which is a trick dispatchers teach. The bartender called once more and said a woman had started bringing flowers to the turnout, and she left them at the alder cut. He asked if Greta thought the woman was family, and Greta said she did not know and that strangers honor strangers more than most. The editor killed 2 paragraphs about the towing club because it would invite noise, and he preferred the clean arc of small clues. Greta agreed, because the point was not a club or a badge or a wreck, but the way ordinary objects built a clear end. She listened one last time and heard something she had missed, which happens when minds want answers and forget to trust the quiet. The very first second carried a shy sigh like people make when they press record and pretend they are not scared of new evidence. Greta printed that detail and moved it near the top, and she explained that simple acts create proof that survives strangers and storms. She never used the word hero, and she never used wild language, and she left the title to her editor, who kept things plain. When the story ran, the county announced a permanent fund for roadside beacons that log closures to a public map without excuses. Visitors call it the green light board, and techs call it the quiet wall, and the valley calls it the keen rule. Greta keeps the thumb drive in a small drawer, and she checks the timestamps now and then, and they have not changed. She believes the last decision Mara and Colby made was to document, and that choice laid stepping stones across a very dark place. The valley will always have roads that curl into quiet, and someone will always think cones look official when no one is watching. She writes that the recording made their last minutes heavier than memory, which fades and bends, and lighter than rumor, which never ends. On clear nights, the ravine carries sound like a wire, and 2 short horn calls followed by one still tag the hour. Greta parks on the shoulder, keeps her phone in her pocket, and lets the quiet work without her voice explaining every piece. The story of the thumb drive is not about a monster in the trees or a curse pinned to bad weather. It is about a phone and a breath, and the way background noises can draw a map that people can follow later. She ends notes with a sentence she never printed, because printed promises feel heavier than memory deserves when strangers are gone. Someone pressed record, and someone stayed brave for long enough, and the evidence they made did not let the valley forget.
He robbed banks without saying a word. The note was for police only. In the quiet hours of a late autumn morning, when frost still clung to the sidewalks of suburban Cleveland and the sun had barely risen above the steel-gray rooftops, a man walked into the Huntington National Bank on East 93rd Street with nothing but a folded piece of paper in his hand. It was the year 2013, November the 12th, just past 9 o'clock, and the air inside the bank was warm too, warm-filled with the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the faint scent of coffee from the lobby dispenser. He wore a navy blue windbreaker, unzipped, over a plain gray hoodie, jeans that had seen too many washes, and scuffed work boots. Nothing about him stood out, not his height, not his build, not even the way he moved. Calm, deliberate, silent. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? He approached the second teller window where a woman named Marjorie, her name tag slightly crooked, was counting change into a tray. She looked up, smiled politely, and said, "Good morning. How can I help you?" He didn't return the smile, didn't speak. Instead, he slid the folded note across the counter. Marjorie picked it up, unfolded it slowly, her eyes scanning the neatly printed words. "This is a robbery. Put $10,000 in this bag. No die packs, no marked bills. I am armed. Do not alert police. This note is for you only. After I leave, call them." Beneath it, a small brown paper sack lay flat, like something from a grocery run. Her fingers trembled, her breath caught. She glanced up. He hadn't moved. His hands were empty, palms down on the counter. But his eyes, they held hers. Not angry, not wild, just steady, cold, like ice over deep water. She nodded once, turned quietly, and began gathering bills from her drawer. 10 stacks of $100 bills. She placed them carefully into the bag, sealed it with a fold, and pushed it back toward him. He took it, slid it under his jacket. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out the front door, disappearing into the pale morning light. No alarm, no shouting, no panic at first. It wasn't until 2 minutes later, when Marjorie finally pressed the silent button beneath her desk, that the chaos began. Police arrived within 4 minutes, officers Reyes and Holloway from the 5th District rolling up in a marked cruiser, lights flashing, but sirens off. By then, the man was gone, vanished. Surveillance footage showed him exiting the bank, adjusting his hood, turning left onto Euclid Avenue, walking at a normal pace, no running, no urgency, before cutting through an alley behind a shuttered laundromat. The camera lost him there. But the note? The note remained, and it would become the thread that unraveled one of the most peculiar bank robbery sprees in modern American history. His name was Thaddeus Vale. Born in 1987 in Youngstown, Ohio, a rusted city where factories once roared but now stood silent, skeletons of steel and brick overtaken by weeds and time, Thaddeus was the son of a mechanic and a school cafeteria worker, raised in a modest bungalow on Glenwood Drive, where the paint peeled in summer and the furnace rattled all winter. He was bright, top of his class at Rayan High, fluent in algebra and physics, could take apart a carburetor and rebuild it blindfolded, but life had a way of bending people in ways they couldn't predict. After high school, he enrolled at Kent State University on a partial scholarship, studying mechanical engineering. But halfway through his sophomore year, his mother fell ill, pancreatic cancer, aggressive and swift. The medical bills piled up, insurance didn't cover everything. Thaddeus dropped out to care for her, working double shifts at a warehouse in Akron, hauling boxes from midnight to dawn. She passed in the spring of 2010, and when she did, something in him cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. He drifted after that, lived in motels with weekly rates, took odd jobs, janitorial work, tree trimming, snow plowing, never stayed in one place longer than a few months. He avoided people, spoke little, read constantly philosophy, criminology, old detective novels, and somewhere in those pages, in the quiet solitude of motel rooms lit by flickering lamps, an idea formed. If banks were machines, then perhaps they could be manipulated like any other mechanism. Clean, precise, no violence, no hostages, just a message, a demand, a transaction. And so, in the fall of 2013, Thaddeus Vale began his campaign. The Huntington robbery was the first, but not the last. 3 days later, on November the 15th, another note appeared, this time at a PNC branch in Parma, Ohio. Same handwriting, same calm, chillin' tone, $10,000. In cash. No tricks. I will not harm anyone, but I am armed. Leave the money in the bag, walk away, call police when I'm gone. Again, no words spoken. Again, the teller complied. Again, he vanished. Then, on November the 18th, a third bank, Fifth Third, this time in Medina, same method, same silence, same result. By now, local news had caught wind. Headlines screamed, "Silent Bandit strikes again." Police released grainy stills from security footage, back of headshots, blurred faces, a man in a hoodie moving like a shadow between buildings. Task forces were assembled. Detectives pored over maps, timelines, witness statements, but Thaddeus was careful, meticulous. He never used the same route twice, always entered during shift changes, when attention wavered, always chose branches with minimal security presence, and always left the note as his only voice. What made him different wasn't just the silence, it was the precision, the lack of greed. 10,000 each time, never more, never less, no demands for 20s or 50s, always hundreds. Easy to carry, easy to hide, and never once did he threaten a teller beyond the written warning. Never raised his voice, never reached for a weapon, yet every note carried the same phrase, "I am armed." Was he? Police couldn't say for sure. No gun was ever seen, no bulge in his jacket captured on camera, but the words alone were enough. Fear doesn't need a barrel to be real. As the spree continued, 4 banks in 5 weeks, the FBI got involved. Special Agent Lorna Keene, a veteran of the Cleveland Field Office, took point. Sharp-eyed, mid-40s, with a reputation for solving cold cases through patience and pattern recognition, she studied every detail. The notes, the timing, the geography. She noticed something others missed. All the banks were within a 30-mile radius of Cleveland. All were mid-sized branches, not the biggest, not the smallest. All had similar layouts, 2 teller windows near the entrance, security cameras angled slightly downward, no armed guards on duty, and all were robbed between 9:15 and 10 o'clock in the morning, just after opening, before the lunch rush. More telling? Each location was near a public transit line, bus routes, rail stations, places where a person could disappear into the flow of daily commuters. Agent Keene also studied the handwriting. Not rushed, not scribbled. Carefully printed block letters, evenly spaced, almost typewritten in their consistency, no smudges, no corrections. Whoever wrote these notes had practiced, repeatedly. And then there was the language. "I will not harm anyone." That phrase appeared in 3 of the 5 notes. Not typical for a robber. Most threats are vague, aggressive, designed to intimidate. But this sounded almost apologetic. defensive, as if he needed to justify his actions even to himself. Keene leaned back in her chair one evening, the glow of her computer screen casting long shadows across her office. Outside, rain tapped against the window. She stared at the timeline pinned to the wall, 5 red dots marking the banks, connected by thin black lines showing possible escape routes. "He's not a criminal," she murmured. "He's a machine." Her partner, Agent Darnell, looked up from his coffee. "What?" "This isn't random. It's procedural. Every move calculated, every word chosen. He's not trying to get rich. He's trying to prove something." "Prove what?" Keene didn't answer. Not yet. Meanwhile, Thaddeus had moved on. By December the 3rd, he struck again, this time in Elyria, a quiet city west of Cleveland. Another bank, another note, another 10,000. But this time, something changed. The teller, a young man named Calvin, hesitated. He read the note, looked up, saw Thaddeus standing there, motionless. Something in his eyes, maybe the exhaustion, maybe the sorrow, made Calvin pause. Instead of reaching for the money, he wrote a note of his own on a scrap of paper. "Are you okay?" He slid it across the counter. Thaddeus blinked. For the first time in weeks, his expression shifted. Just slightly. A flicker. Confusion. Surprise. He looked at the words, then back at Calvin. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket, not for a weapon, but for a pen. He wrote beneath Calvin's question, "I have to do this. Please, just give me the money." Calvin nodded, fetched the cash, handed it over. And Thaddeus left. But that exchange haunted him. That night, in a dimly lit motel room on Oberlin Road, he sat on the edge of the bed, the stolen money stacked neatly on the dresser. He hadn't spent $1, not one. The bags remained sealed. He hadn't bought food, clothes, shelter, nothing. He opened a notebook, thick, leather-bound, filled with equations, diagrams, lists. On the latest page, he had written, objective, $60,000. Purpose, clear debt, restore dignity, end cycle. 60,000. That was the number. The sum of his mother's unpaid medical bills. The balance that had ruined his credit, barred him from loans, kept him from rebuilding. 60,000, and he was halfway there. But now, Calvin's question echoed in his mind. "Are you okay?" No, he wasn't. He hadn't slept through the night in months. Dreams of his mother calling his name from a dark hallway, waking up, sweating, heart pounding. The weight of the lie, the fiction he'd created, pressed on his chest like a stone. He wasn't a monster, but he wasn't innocent either. On December the 9th, he entered a key bank in Lorraine. Same routine, same note, same silence. But as he waited for the teller to gather the money, he noticed something different. A photo on her desk. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, smiling in a yellow dress. Beside it, a small Christmas ornament, handmade, glued-on glitter, crooked star on top. His throat tightened. For the first time, he looked around. Really looked. The bank wasn't just a machine, it was full of people. A man in a suit tapping his foot, waiting to deposit a paycheck. An elderly woman struggling with her purse. A janitor mopping the far corner, humming softly. These weren't cogs, they were lives. And he was disrupting them. When the teller handed him the bag, he didn't take it immediately. He stared at it. Then at her. Her name tag read Nadia. She gave a small, nervous nod. He whispered so low, only she could hear, "I'm sorry." Then he turned and walked out. But not far. He didn't go to the alley. Didn't vanish. Instead, he sat on a bench outside a gas station half a block away, the bag at his feet, his head in his hands. 20 minutes later, Officer Reyes, same officer from the first robbery, pulled up, responding to a call about a suspicious person. He recognized the description. Hoodie, windbreaker, sitting still. He approached slowly, hand near his sidearm. "Sir, you all right?" Thaddeus didn't look up. "I robbed 5 banks," he said, voice hollow. "The money's in the bag. I didn't spend it. I want to turn myself in." Reyes froze. "You what?" "I have the notes. Everything. I'll cooperate. Just don't shoot me." And just like that, it was over. Back at the station, Thaddeus was processed quietly. No cuffs at first, no shouting. When Agent Keene entered the interrogation room, she studied him for a long moment. "You're not what I expected," she said. He looked up. "I'm not who I thought I was either." She Saturday, "Why? Why do this?" He exhaled. "To pay my mother's debts, to stop feeling like a failure." I thought if I could fix that one thing, maybe I could start over. And the silence? I didn't want to scare anyone. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Words, they can make things worse. But a note, you can read it, decide how to respond, gives people control. Keen leaned forward. You wrote, "I am armed every time." Were you? He hesitated, then shook his head. No, I wasn't. But I knew they'd believe it. Fear works faster than truth. She nodded slowly. You're smarter than most people who do this. That's why you lasted so long. But not smart enough to know it wouldn't fix anything. No, she agreed. Money rarely does. The case made national headlines. The silent bandit surrenders. Note-writing robber claims he just wanted to be free. Some called him a criminal, others a tragic figure. A man broken by a system that offered no second chances. At trial, in March of 2014, Thaddeus pleaded guilty to 5 counts of bank robbery. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and tired eyes, listened to his statement. I made a choice, he said, voice steady but quiet. A wrong one. I thought I was correcting a mistake, but I only made another. I accept responsibility. And I apologize to the tellers, to the banks, to everyone I frightened. I'm not asking for mercy, just understanding. The courtroom was silent. The judge sentenced him to 6 years in federal prison, time credited for time served, minimum security, eligible for parole in 3. As he was led away, Agent Keen watched from the back row. Later, she visited him at the Federal Correctional Institution in Elkton. How are you? She asked. Better, he said. I read, I write, I help teach math to other inmates. I'm thinking. About what? Starting over. Legally. Honestly, maybe becoming a counselor. For people who feel trapped. She smiled faintly. You'd be good at that. He looked out the window. Snow was falling gently over the yard. I finally understand, he said. The note wasn't for the police. It was for me. A way to pretend I wasn't really doing this. To keep my conscience quiet. And now? Now I speak. Even when it hurts. Years passed. Thaddeus was released in the summer of 2017. Found work at a community center in Toledo, tutoring teens in math and science. Slowly rebuilt his life. Paid off the rest of his mother's debts, not with stolen money, but with honest wages. He never robbed another bank. He never needed to. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do isn't to take silence as armor, but to break it and speak. They found a shipwreck, but it wasn't supposed to exist. It was late autumn in the year 1957 when a group of marine surveyors working off the coast of Maine stumbled upon something that defied every known record, something buried beneath layers of silt and kelp cradled by the cold Atlantic floor. The vessel, partially collapsed but unmistakably intact in sections, lay at a depth of nearly 200 feet just beyond the continental shelf near Monhegan Island. What made the discovery so unnerving wasn't merely its condition, it was the design. The hull bore no resemblance to any documented ship from the colonial era, nor did it match the blueprints of early American fishing vessels or merchant schooners. Its structure was sleek, almost futuristic for its time, with riveted plating arranged in an unusual spiral pattern and portholes shaped like ovals rather than circles. Most peculiar of all, there were no markings, no name, no registry number, nothing to suggest where it came from or who had sailed her. Before we begin, tell me where are you listening from and what time is it there? The team, led by Silas Thorne, a wiry, weather-beaten oceanographer with salt-crusted boots and a permanent squint from years spent scanning horizons, had been mapping the seabed for potential oil deposits when their sonar picked up an anomaly. At first, they assumed it was a submerged rock formation, perhaps an ancient glacial deposit left behind by retreating ice sheets. But as the remote-operated camera descended through the murky water, the image on the monitor shifted from shadow to shape and then, suddenly, into undeniable form. A ship. Not just any ship, but one that looked as though it had been placed there deliberately, like a secret meant to stay hidden. Silas leaned forward in his chair aboard the research vessel Auriga, his breath catching in his throat. "Back it up," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "Just a few feet, let's get a wider angle." The technician obeyed, guiding the submersible drone backward. And there, illuminated in the beam of its spotlight, the full silhouette emerged long, narrow, with a prow that curved upward like the beak of some prehistoric bird. No sails, no smokestacks. Just smooth metal, stained green with corrosion, yet still holding its shape after decades, perhaps centuries, beneath the waves. "What in God's name?" murmured Elric Foss, the expedition's lead historian, a man whose knowledge of maritime archaeology spanned 3 continents. He adjusted his glasses, peering at the screen as if trying to decipher a dream. "That isn't 18th century. Not even close. Look at the bow. There's no reinforcement for ramming, no figurehead mount. This isn't built for wind, it's built for speed." The date was November 12th, 1957. The sky above the Auriga was overcast, heavy with the promise of winter storms. Waves slapped against the hull with a steady rhythm, and the air smelled of brine and diesel. Inside the cramped control cabin, tension hummed like a live wire. Every eye was fixed on the monitor, every breath seemed too loud. They sent the drone closer, the camera swept across the deck, or what remained of it. Hatches were sealed shut, fused by time and pressure. One side of the ship had caved inward, likely from implosion or collision, but the other remained surprisingly intact. Then, as the light passed over a recessed panel near the stern, something glinted. Not metal, glass, crystal. The technician zoomed in. Embedded in the hull was a circular window, thick, convex, and darkened with age, but behind it, faintly, something shimmered. A reflection. Or perhaps movement? "No," Elric whispered. "That's impossible. Could be sediment shifting," someone offered, though their voice wavered. Silas didn't respond. He stared, unblinking. Because for a fraction of a second, less than a heartbeat, he thought he saw a shape pass behind the glass. A silhouette. Human? Not quite. Too tall. Too still. They pulled the drone back immediately. Protocol demanded caution. Unknown wrecks could be unstable, even dangerous. But curiosity, once ignited, is not easily quenched. That night, aboard the Auriga, the crew gathered in the mess hall, steaming mugs in hand, voices hushed, logs were reviewed, charts studied. No vessel matching the description had ever been reported missing in those waters, no distress calls, no sightings, nothing. And yet, there it was. Over the next 3 days, they launched 2 more dives. Each time, the images grew clearer. Inside the ship, via a breached section near the midship, the camera revealed corridors narrow, sloping downward at a slight incline, lined with smooth walls that looked almost molded, not welded. There were no ladders, no handrails. Instead, shallow grooves ran along the floor, as if designed for bare feet or something else entirely. Instruments mounted on the walls resembled dials, but their markings were alien circles within triangles, symbols that bore no relation to any known language. One device, partially intact, emitted a faint hum when the drone's light touched it, a vibration so low it was felt more than heard, resonating through the submersible's frame. Elric spent hours comparing the findings to classified naval projects, Cold War prototypes, even rumored Soviet stealth crafts. Nothing fit. The materials alone, alloys later identified as a titanium-zirconium composite, were not in use until the 1980s. How had such a ship ended up at the bottom of the Atlantic in what appeared to be a state of preservation far exceeding its age? Then came the photograph. On the 4th dive, the drone captured an image inside what might have been a control room. In the center stood a pedestal topped with a translucent sphere, cracked but still glowing with a soft internal light blue, pulsing faintly like a slow heartbeat. Around it, 6 seats were arranged in a semicircle, each molded to the shape of a body, but not a human body. The limbs were elongated, the spine curved unnaturally, the headrests were too large, too high. Silas refused to believe it. "It's erosion," he insisted. "Water distortion, trick of the light." But Elric knew better. He had seen cave paintings in France that depicted beings with stars for eyes. He had read declassified documents about Project Sign, about pilots who spoke of disc-shaped objects over New Mexico in 1947. This was different. This was physical, tangible, buried, yes, but waiting. The decision was made to bring up a sample. a small fragment of the hull, carefully extracted using hydraulic cutters. It was placed in a sealed container stored in the ship's lab. That night, the temperature aboard the Auriga dropped without explanation. Crewmen reported hearing whispers in the ventilation shafts, soft, rhythmic, not in any language they recognized. One sailor, Jorvik Menet, swore he saw a reflection in the porthole of his cabin, not his own, but a face, long and pale, watching him from the dark water outside. By morning, the fragment was gone. Not stolen, not misplaced, vanished. The container was intact, locked, undamaged, but inside, empty. Only a fine dust remained, clinging to the sides like ash. Panic began to spread. The captain ordered the mission aborted. They would return to port, file a report with the Navy, and let others decide what to do. But as the Auriga turned east toward Rockland Harbor, the sonar pinged again, this time not from below, but from behind. Something was rising from the wreck, slowly, deliberately. Silas rushed to the deck. The sea was calm, the sky breaking into pale streaks of dawn, but beneath the surface, a disturbance formed a column of bubbles, spiraling upward like a vortex. And then, for just a moment, the water shimmered, as if refracting light from an unseen source. A low tone echoed through the hull, deep and resonant, vibrating the bones of everyone on board. No one spoke, no one moved, and then, silence. When they reached shore, the official report cited equipment malfunction, sonar misinterpretation, and possible geological activity. The footage was classified, the logs were sealed, the crew dispersed, some transferred, others retiring abruptly. Silas Thorne submitted a detailed addendum, only to have it returned with a single sentence stamped across the cover. Information not consistent with established records. He never spoke of it again, not publicly, but in the attic of his cottage in Boothbay Harbor, tucked beneath a loose floorboard, he kept a notebook. Pages filled with sketches, coordinates, and one haunting phrase repeated over and over, as if trying to convince himself it wasn't supposed to be there, it wasn't supposed to exist. Years passed. The story faded into rumor told in hushed tones at coastal bars, scribbled in the margins of obscure journals. Some claimed the wreck resurfaced during a storm in 1973, seen by lobstermen off Matnicus Isle. Others said the Navy recovered it in secret, towing it under cover of fog to a facility in Portsmouth. A few even believed the ship was never human at all, that it had arrived from somewhere else, crash landing in the ocean long before history began recording names and dates. Elric Voss, in his final interview before passing in 2004, was asked if he thought the truth would ever come out. He paused, then smiled faintly. "Truth?" he said. "Sometimes the truth isn't something you find, it's something that finds you. And perhaps, somewhere beneath the cold rolling waves off the coast of Maine, it's still waiting. The sea keeps its secrets well. But not forever. Because even now, on quiet nights when the wind dies down and the stars hang low over the water, fishermen swear they hear it, a faint pulse rising from the deep, a rhythm, a signal, as if something down there is waking up. The urban legend that locals swear is real and won't talk about at night. In the hollowed hills of northern West Virginia, where the trees grow thick and the valleys swallow sound like secrets never meant to be spoken, there's a stretch of road locals avoid after sundown. Not because it's dangerous in the usual way, no sharp curves, no history of accidents, but because something walks there, something that doesn't belong. The road is called Hollow Creek Lane, winding through the unincorporated township of Gormley Mills, a place so small it doesn't appear on most maps, and so quiet that even birds seem reluctant to sing past twilight. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? It was late autumn in the year 1987 when the first official report came in, not to the sheriff's office, but whispered between neighbors over cracked porcelain cups of black coffee. A woman by the name of Thalia Mercer, who lived alone in a weather-worn clapboard house just off Hollow Creek Lane, claimed she saw a figure standing at the edge of her cornfield one evening. She said it wasn't tall, not exactly, but wrung its limbs too long, its head tilted at an angle that made her stomach twist. It didn't move, didn't blink. Just stood there, facing her porch, as if waiting for an invitation she had no intention of giving. Thalia was known in Gormley Mills as a practical woman church every Sunday, grew her own vegetables, kept a loaded 38 inches her nightstand since her husband passed in '69. So when she called Sheriff Harlan Voss 3 nights later, voice trembling like a plucked wire, he listened. He arrived with his flashlight cutting through the fog, boots crunching on frost-laced gravel. The house was dark except for a single lamp glowing behind the kitchen curtain. Thalia met him at the door, wrapped in a faded quilt, eyes wide and bloodshot. "It's back," she whispered. "Same spot, in the field." They walked together toward the edge of the property, the beam of the flashlight slicing through the mist. Nothing moved, no footprints in the damp soil, no snapped branches or disturbed earth. Just silence, thick and heavy, like wool pressed against the ears. Then, from somewhere deep in the corn rows, a sound. A low, wet clicking, like stones being rolled in oil. Sheriff Voss aimed the light, the stalks swayed slightly, though there was no wind, and then nothing. The sound stopped. The air stilled. They stood there for nearly 10 minutes, neither speaking, both feeling watched. Sheriff Voss told Thalia to stay indoors, lock the doors, and call him if anything changed. He drove away slowly, scanning the rearview mirror until the house disappeared behind the trees. He filed a report the next morning, possible hallucination due to stress or sleep deprivation, but privately he marked a note in his personal ledger, Hollow Creek, November 3rd, Thalia Mercer. Heard something, felt something, can't explain. That winter was harsh, long stretches of snow, power outages, roads blocked for days. But people in Gormley Mills noticed other things too. Dogs refused to go into backyards after dark. Chickens vanished without signs of struggle. And on still nights, when the moon hung low and yellow, some swore they heard voices calling from the woods, voices that didn't sound human. Children were kept inside after 6, porch lights stayed on all night. Conversations about Hollow Creek Lane ended quickly, often with a shake of the head and a muttered phrase, "Best not talk about it." Then, in early spring of 1988, a teenager named Corwin Bellwether went missing. He was 16, lanky, with a stutter he'd been trying to overcome since childhood. Corwin liked to walk at night, said it helped him think. His mother, Elspeth, would beg him not to go down Hollow Creek Lane, but he always shrugged and said, "Nothing out there but trees and dirt." On the night of March 14th, he left after dinner with a notebook in his pocket, claiming he was writing poetry for school. He never came back. Search parties combed the woods for weeks. Bloodhounds picked up his scent near the creek bed, then lost it abruptly, as if he'd stepped off the face of the earth. A week later, his boots were found placed neatly side by side at the base of an old sycamore, roots tangled like knuckles. No body, no blood, no explanation. The official cause of disappearance? Presumed runaway. But in Gormley Mills, folks knew better. They looked at each other in church pews, eyes shadowed, lips tight. They didn't say much. But they stopped walking that road entirely. Years passed, the story faded mostly. New families moved into the valley, drawn by cheap land and quiet living. They laughed at the old tales. Ghosts, they'd say. Come on. But then, little things started happening. Lights flickering in empty rooms, cold spots in hallways. One woman, Miriam Huxley, claimed she saw a figure in her bathroom mirror one night, a man with sunken eyes and a mouth sewn shut with black thread. She screamed, turned on the light, and it was gone. The next morning, she found a single muddy footprint on the linoleum leading from the bathtub to the door, but the windows were locked. The house had no basement access. In 2005, a documentary crew from Pittsburgh arrived, determined to debunk the myth. They set up cameras along Hollow Creek Lane, motion sensors, audio recorders. For 2 nights, nothing. On the 3rd, at precisely 2:13 in the morning, every device failed simultaneously. The footage showed only static, but audio captured a whisper, faint at first, then clearer. You're not supposed to see. When the lead technician reviewed the files, he noticed something else. In the background, beneath the static, a rhythmic tapping 3 slow knocks, pause, then 2 quick ones, like a code or a warning. He played it for an elderly resident named Otis Grindle, who'd lived in Gormley Mills his entire life. Otis listened once, turned pale, and said, "That's how they used to signal before the mine collapsed in '49. Only the men trapped underground knew that pattern. He refused to speak another word on the subject. By 2012, Hollow Creek Lane was officially closed. The county put up a rusted gate, chained and padlocked, with a sign that read, "Road closed, no trespassing." But kids still dared each other to go. Teens from nearby towns would drive up on weekends, flashlights in hand, laughing nervously as they approached the gate. Most turned back before reaching the tree line. But a few went further. One such group, in October of 2017, included a boy named Jory Linthwaite. He was 17, curious, raised on horror films and internet creepypastas. He didn't believe in ghosts, he believed in adrenaline. That night, he and 3 friends cut the chain with bolt cutters and slipped through. They brought cameras, a Ouija board, even a EVP recorder. They set up camp near the old sycamore where Corwin's boots were found. At first, it was jokes. Flashlight beams dancing through the trees, mocking whispers. Then, around 1 o'clock, the temperature dropped sharply. Breath came out in thick clouds. Their phones died, one by one. Then the recorder picked up a voice, clear, childlike, but distorted. "Don't look behind you." All 4 spun around. Nothing there. But when they turned back, the Ouija board planchette had moved on its own, spelling "Leave now." They packed up fast. As they ran toward the gate, Jory tripped. His friends thought he'd caught his foot on a root, but when they stopped and turned, Jory wasn't getting up. He was staring into the trees, mouth open, eyes wide with terror. "It's watching," he whispered. "It's smiling." They pulled him up, half dragging him the rest of the way. The chain was intact again, no sign it had ever been cut. Jory didn't speak for 3 days. When he finally did, he described a face pale, stretched, with too many teeth. He said it stood between the trees, perfectly still, just smiling. And then, in a voice not his own, he said, "It knows my name." After that, the county welded the gate shut, installed surveillance cameras. Within a week, all 4 cameras malfunctioned. Footage showed nothing but snow, even though the night was clear. And in the corner of one frame, barely visible, a shadow tall, thin, with fingers too long to be real, reached slowly toward the lens. To this day, residents of Gormley Mills won't go near Hollow Creek Lane after dark. If you ask them why, they'll change the subject, or give you a look one that says, "You don't want to know." But if you visit in late autumn, when the leaves turn brittle and the wind carries the scent of damp earth and decay, stand at the edge of that road at dusk. Listen, really listen. You might hear the faintest echo of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. You might feel the air thicken, your breath shorten, your skin prickle as if unseen eyes have settled on you. And if you're foolish enough to step past the gate, to walk just a few yards down that cracked asphalt path, you may notice something worse. The silence isn't empty. It's waiting. And sometimes, on the coldest nights, when the moon hides behind clouds and the world holds its breath, you can hear it breathe back. They say it mimics voices, calls out names in familiar tones, your mother's lullaby, your best friend's laugh, just to lure you deeper. But those who've heard it warn, don't answer, don't turn. Don't even think about looking back. Because once it has your attention, it never lets go. There's a reason the elders in Gormley Mills whisper prayers before bedtime, why parents check their children's windows twice, why on certain nights the entire town seems to go dark at once, as if hiding. It's not superstition, it's survival. And if you find yourself near Hollow Creek Lane when the clock strikes midnight, remember this. The stories aren't legends. They're warnings. And the thing in the woods? It remembers every person who didn't listen. Even now, in the hush between heartbeats, in the space where shadows grow longer than they should, something stirs. Not far, not loud, but close enough to hear you breathe. So tell me again, where are you listening from? And more importantly, are you alone? Missing 411, vanished in broad daylight 20 feet from family. On a crisp October afternoon in the year 1997, beneath a sky of pale blue streaked with wisps of cloud like torn lace, the small town of Pine Hollow, nestled in the rugged folds of northern Idaho, seemed untouched by urgency or fear. The air carried the faint scent of pine resin and damp earth, remnants of an early morning frost that had melted under the sun's gentle gaze. Children played near the edge of the woods behind their homes, their laughter echoing across open fields where goldenrod swayed in the breeze. It was one of those rare autumn days when time felt suspended, when even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Before we begin, tell me where are you listening from and what time is it there? At precisely 3:28 in the afternoon on the 14th day of October, 1997, Elias Thornwood, a quiet boy of 9 years old, with eyes the color of storm clouds and hair so dark it almost swallowed the light, vanished without a sound. He wasn't taken from a dark alley, nor snatched during a thunderstorm, nor lured into the shadows by a stranger with hollow promises. No, he disappeared in broad daylight, just 20 feet from where his family stood, gathered in their backyard for a simple Sunday gathering. The Thornwoods lived in a modest 2-story cedar house at the end of Hemlock Lane, a gravel road fringed by towering pines and thick underbrush. Their property backed onto the dense expanse of the Bitterroot National Forest, where deer trails wound through ferns and fallen logs, and silence often pressed against the ears like cotton. That day, Elias's grandmother, Margaret, had come down from Missoula to visit. His father, Harlan, a mechanic with calloused hands and a voice like gravel rolling in a tin can, was grilling bratwurst over a charcoal fire. His mother, Lila, wore her favorite lavender apron and stirred a pot of apple cider spiced with cinnamon and cloves. His older sister, Cora, then 11, sat cross-legged on a patch of grass, braiding daisies into a crown while humming an old folk tune passed down from her great-aunt. Elias had been playing hide-and-seek with the neighbor's son, Joran Pike, a wiry boy with freckles scattered across his nose like pepper. They'd agreed on boundaries, the fence line, the old oak tree with the tire swing, and the edge of the woods, which both parents had strictly forbidden them from crossing. Not beyond the stump, Harlan had said earlier, pointing to a moss-covered log half buried in ivy. That forest doesn't forgive mistakes. It was just after 3 o'clock when Joran ducked behind the woodpile near the garage, giggling as Elias counted aloud, his back pressed against the cherry tree in the center of the yard. 10, 9, 8. His voice rang clear and bright. Birds chirped in the hedges. A dog barked somewhere down the lane. The world felt safe, predictable. When Elias reached 0, he turned, scanned the yard, and called out, "Ready or not?" He found Joran quickly, bursting from behind the logs with a triumphant whoop. Then came the next round. This time, Elias hid. He darted toward the far side of the yard, near the rusted garden shed where tomato vines curled around broken trellises. He crouched low, pressing himself into the shadow of the wall, heart thudding with excitement. The plan was simple. He would stay hidden until Joran gave up and called his name. But he never emerged. 3:28. That's when Cora first noticed. She looked up from her flower crown, squinting across the lawn. "Where's Elias?" She asked, her voice light at first, tinged only with mild curiosity. No one answered immediately. Harlan flipped a sausage with tongs. Lila poured cider into mugs. Margaret rocked gently in the folding chair, knitting needles clicking. "Elias?" Cora called again, louder this time. Still nothing. Joran frowned. "He was right here. I saw him go behind the shed." Harlan set the tongs down. "Elias, enough hiding now." Silence. Then, movement, a flicker of unease passing between the adults like a cold draft under a door. Lila wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward the shed, her steps quickening. "Elias? Sweetheart, come out. Dinner's ready." She peered around the corner. Nothing. Just a scattering of fallen leaves and a single red sneaker lying on its side. Her breath caught. "Harlan?" Her voice cracked like dry wood. "He's not here." Within seconds, the peaceful backyard erupted into chaos. Harlan sprinted to the shed, circled it twice, then pushed through the tall grass toward the tree line. "Elias! Elias!" His shouts tore through the stillness, sharp and desperate. Joran began to cry. Cora stood frozen, clutching her unfinished daisy chain, her knuckles white. Margaret rose slowly, her knitting falling to the ground. "He wouldn't go into the woods," she whispered. "He knows better." But the truth was undeniable. The boundary line marked by the old stump had been crossed. A trail of crushed ferns and disturbed soil led directly into the trees. And then, abruptly, the trail ended, as if the earth itself had swallowed him whole. Neighbors arrived within minutes. Sheriff Dale Mercer, a man with salt and pepper hair and a slow, deliberate way of speaking, arrived with 2 deputies and a German shepherd named Rex. Search teams fanned out through the forest, calling Elias's name, their flashlights cutting beams through the thinning light. Volunteers joined in local hunters, school teachers, even the postman, Mr. Havelock, who had delivered mail on Hemlock Lane for 32 years. They searched all night, they searched the next day, they dragged the creek behind the property, combed abandoned mining shafts half a mile east, checked every cabin and trailer within a 10-mile radius. Helicopters circled overhead, their rotors beating the air like frantic wings. Nothing. No footprints beyond the initial trail, no clothing snagged on branches, no signs of struggle, no ransom note, no suspicious vehicles reported. Elias Thornwood had simply ceased to exist, 20 feet from the people who loved him most. The investigation stretched for months. FBI agents reviewed grainy security footage from a gas station 3 miles away useless. Psychics were consulted, though Sheriff Mercer rolled his eyes and called them noisemakers. Tips poured in, some credible, most not. A woman in Spokane claimed she saw a boy matching Elias's description boarding a Greyhound bus with a man in a brown coat. Another caller said he'd seen a van parked near the forest edge around 3:15 that day, engine running, windows tinted, but no license plate, no confirmation. And then, silence. Years passed. The missing posters yellowed and peeled from telephone poles, the search parties disbanded. The case file grew thick with dead ends and unanswered questions, eventually labeled inactive by the county office. Yet, the Thornwoods never stopped looking. Lila kept Elias's room exactly as it was, blue walls with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, a toy truck overturned on the rug, a book splayed open on the bed. Every birthday, she lit a candle. Every Christmas, she placed a present under the tree with his name on it. Harlan quit his job at the garage and spent weekends hiking deep into the bitterroots, carving markers into trees, whispering his son's name into the wind. Cora, once a carefree girl with wildflower crowns and scraped knees, grew into a woman haunted by memory. She studied forensic anthropology at the University of Montana, determined to understand how someone could vanish without a trace. She wrote letters to missing persons databases, compared Elias's case to others, especially those in national parks or remote areas. That's when she stumbled upon something unsettling. There were patterns. Boys, mostly between the ages of 8 and 12, disappeared near forests, often within sight of family, no evidence of abduction, no bodies ever recovered. Cases scattered across different states, Montana, Colorado, New Hampshire, West Virginia, but clustered strangely around protected wilderness areas, federal land, regions with limited surveillance. One researcher, David Paulides, had compiled dozens of these cases under a project he called Missing 411. When Cora read his work, her blood ran cold. Elias's disappearance fit the profile perfectly: daylight, proximity to family, sudden absence, lack of forensic evidence. Even the terrain matched: soft soil, dense canopy, poor cell reception. But why? What connected these children? Some theories surfaced: wild animals, though no claw marks, no remains; runaways, though none left notes or took belongings; foul play by strangers, yet no witnesses, no DNA. Others whispered about more troubling possibilities: coordinated abductions, underground networks, or something darker, something the official reports refused to acknowledge. Then came the rumors. Hunters in the Bitterroots spoke in hushed tones about figures seen deep in the woods, tall, unnaturally still, moving without sound. Old-timers recalled stories from native elders about the vanishing people, spirits said to dwell in the high timber, who took children who strayed too far. Some believed the forest itself had a consciousness, a hunger. Sheriff Mercer dismissed such talk. "Grief makes people see ghosts," he said once, leaning against his cruiser outside the diner on Main Street. Truth is, sometimes bad things happen for no reason, and sometimes we never get answers. But Cora couldn't accept that. In the spring of 2016, 17 years after Elias vanished, she returned to Pine Hollow with a team of researchers and a drone equipped with thermal imaging. They scanned the forest floor, focusing on the area just beyond the stump. On the third day, the drone detected an anomaly, a shallow depression in the earth, roughly the size of a child, partially concealed by roots and moss. Soil samples revealed traces of human decomposition, but DNA testing yielded inconclusive results. Too degraded, too old. Still, it was something. That night, Cora sat on the porch of the old house, now weathered and quiet, rocking in her grandmother's chair. The stars blinked above, cold and distant. A breeze stirred the pines, whispering through the needles like voices just below hearing. And then, faintly, she heard it. A giggle, high-pitched, familiar. It came from the edge of the woods. She stood, heart hammering, eyes fixed on the darkness. "Elias?" she whispered. No answer, only the wind. But the next morning, nestled among the roots of the old oak, they found it a small wooden horse, hand-carved, one ear chipped. It had belonged to Elias. He'd carried it everywhere. It was gone the day he disappeared. Now it was back. No fingerprints, no footprints, just the toy, resting on a bed of pine cones as if placed there with care. The local news picked up the story briefly. Ghostly return read one headline. Mystery deepens in cold case, said another. But soon, attention faded. Life moved on. Except for Cora. She now lives in Pine Hollow year-round, working from a home office filled with maps, photographs, and binders labeled Project Echo, her personal archive dedicated to unresolved disappearances. She gives lectures at universities, appears on podcasts, urges families to speak up, to question, to remember, and every October 14th at precisely 3:28 in the afternoon, she walks to the edge of the woods, stands at the moss-covered stump, and calls her brother's name. Sometimes, she says, the wind answers. Other times, the silence is unbearable. But she continues, because as long as one person remembers, Elias Thornwood is not truly gone. And perhaps, just perhaps, he is waiting. Waiting for someone to finally listen. To finally look not just outward into the trees, but inward into the spaces between memory and myth, where truth sometimes hides in plain sight. Like a child behind a garden shed, smiling, counting down until someone finds him, or until the forest takes another.